Okay, so now that we've talked about the mirror modifier a little bit, we're just going to jump in and do a really quick demo on it because I think it will be easier to understand when you see it in practice. So all I have here is a new empty Blender scene. I just created a new scene and I deleted everything in it. That is all I did off camera. So for this, we are going to make a humanoid figure, but character modeling is something that takes quite a bit of time. So just for the purposes of a quick demonstration on the mirror modifier, we're going to simplify this. So for this demonstration, I'm going to make a gingerbread man. This is great because it's a humanoid form. It is symmetrical, but it is dramatically simplified from an actual character model. So let's jump in. Now for this, I am going to start with a cylinder. So let's just add a cylinder. And I want them to be facing forward so that when I press 1 on the numpad, I'm looking at the front of the gingerbread man. So let's rotate this around because this is going to be the head. So let's press R, X, and 90. Great. The scale for this does not matter as such. It's going to be a standalone model, so it doesn't need to be scaled appropriately relative to any other models. So make it basically whatever size you like. I'm just moving it up because I like to always treat the grid lines here as the ground plane. So let's make this thinner. SY, scale it in. Okay, so now we are ready to really get started. This is going to be our starting point, but we want to use a mirror modifier so that we don't have to model both sides of this. We're just going to model the right side and it's going to be mirrored over to the left. So let's start by prepping this model a little bit, or this primitive, I should say. Tabbing into edit mode, in vertex select, I'm going to come into perspective so I can see a little bit better what I'm doing. I'm going to select the one vertex at the very top and the one at the very bottom. These are the ones that are aligned with this z-axis when we come into front orthographic. So I want to split this mesh in half, basically. So if I deleted it right now, it would delete this whole face, which we could fill. That's a totally valid method, but I'm just going to sort of preemptively prevent that by splitting this face. We're going to split that again with the join operation. So just with these two selected, just press J on your keyboard to join them, and now our faces are split. We're going to do the same thing on the back. Select the top one, select the bottom one, J to join. Okay, so now we have it split. Let's press 1 on our numpad to come into front orthographic. Let's move into wireframe shading, either by pressing it up here or doing the Z shortcut in the radial menu. Let's box select everything on the left side, press X, and delete the vertices. Cool. So now we have this prepped to use a mirror modifier. And if you like, you can fix the shading right here, which we've gone over. Again, I'm having this funny shading because I have a non-uniform scale. So just Control A, apply the scale, all better. Okay, so now let us add a mirror modifier to this. So in the properties editor, under the modifier properties, this little wrench, add modifier, mirror. Great. I'm going to turn on clipping for the moment because I don't want this mesh to be separated from itself. Okay, so if you look at a gingerbread man, they don't really have any real neck to speak of. It just sort of comes around the head, like straight into the arms. There's no neck, there's no shoulder. Straight into the arms, which kind of come and form a curve that goes straight into the legs. So let's try to see how we can make that. So tab into edit mode. And we need to extrude out from some of these bottom faces. And this part is going to be a little bit trial and error to see how many faces we need to select to get it to be the right thickness. So with all these faces selected, just press E to extrude. And now you'll see that this, although they're being extruded this way, this face becomes stretched because we have clipping on. So if it were off, just to demonstrate, you would get this hole in the mesh, which we do not want. So turn clipping on, extrude. Yeah, again, there's no real neck to speak of, so we are going to probably extrude the arms from right here. So just pull it out a little bit, and we may need to change sort of the size of some of these things. And this does not matter as much, but if this kind of thing bothers you, you can sort of even these faces out. It just makes kind of a nicer looking wireframe. All right. And again, we're getting locked to this normal, so it's sort of getting wider at the bottom, which we don't really want. So we can hit Z to sort of free extrude and just kind of bring it more straight down. Now, I think I'm going to move this edge loop down a little bit. I'm just alt-clicking to select all the way around it. Let's pull out some arms. Now, for the arms, although there's no neck on a gingerbread man, and the arms just kind of come straight out of this portion, I don't really want them to come to such a fine edge right here. So I'm just going to add one edge loop going along here to give it a little bit of distance. So we're just going to press Control R, hover, click, slide it up about where we want it. Again, we may need to shift it, but no problem. And click there. So now this edge is just sort of like a retaining edge, if you will, to keep this from becoming too sharp of an angle right here. Okay, so now we're going to select this face on the side. I'm going to hit E to extrude and bring out just the start of our arms. So now gingerbread men don't have hands or anything like that to worry about, but their arms are much more rounded. So the way that we round out shapes, as we've discussed in previous videos, is to add more edges, more vertices, add more detail, more geometry to that section. So let's add some edge loops. Let's start with just one. We're going to hit Control R and put an edge loop just here. So now I want to bring this edge out a little bit to change the profile. It's looking pretty good. So now this is still quite pointy, so the only way we can round out a shape is to add more vertices. So in this case, I'm going to use bevel to round this out. So I'm going to first select this edge loop. And while you don't need to select the entire loop to get the silhouette you like, if you select only this edge and bevel it, it creates triangles here, which may or may not be an issue depending on what you're working on. For something this simplistic, it probably would not be an issue, but just for good practice, I like to avoid triangles where I can early on in the model and only add them where it is absolutely necessary, because it messes up our things like the ability to select a whole loop and things like that. So let's just select the whole edge loop by holding Alt and clicking on it. And now we're just going to bevel the whole thing. Now this does add a few more faces here, and if we were doing this for something like a game where we really want our geometry to be optimized and to be as efficient as possible, we probably wouldn't want these extra faces, just because it would slow our computer down without really benefiting us in any way. But at this stage of the modeling, I do think it's worth it to keep my ability to select loops. So we're just going to have a few extra faces. So now I want to round out these edges. So these edges don't have a full loop. When you alt-click on them, it just selects that edge. So this probably will create some triangles, but again, we're just trying to minimize the triangles. We're not trying to avoid them altogether. So select those edges and Control B to bevel them. So now we have a bit more of a round shape. And you could continue to bevel these edges out, just doing the same process, and it would just become progressively smoother. But we're going to just go ahead and move forward with the leg section. So let's do that. So the legs on a gingerbread man come sort of out at a pretty wide angle. And they don't really have any feet. Again, it's just sort of little rounded stumps like this. So in order to do that, we need to select all the bottom faces and put E to extrude. Now we still have clipping on, so we're getting sort of a skirt on this guy, which is fine, but we're making a gingerbread man, not a gingerbread woman. So we just need to turn clipping off. So you'll see that you may toggle clipping on and off over the course of modeling something. It's not something that is set in stone. It can be toggled on and off dynamically as you model, and it will not affect anything that you have already created. So with clipping off, if we extrude now, you get the split that we need here for the legs. And actually, this is the kind of sharp angle I was trying to avoid up here. So let's quickly Control Z to undo that and add another edge loop right here to sort of protect us from having such a sharp angle. So now we're not going to select this very middle piece. We're just going to select these ones and E to extrude. So now we just don't have quite as sharp an angle, and you can come up here and adjust it so it's has more of that rounded, that arch sort of look. So now I believe these legs are a little bit long for if you're thinking about an actual gingerbread person. They have sort of stumpy limbs. So now we just need to change the shape of this part a little bit to be more rounded as we have it up here. So no worries, we already know how to do that. Now we already have quite a number of edge loops on the leg here, so I don't think we need to add any more right away. Whereas with the arm, we just had this sort of rectangular shape. We didn't have any of the information in the middle that we needed. So we have this information now, so we just need to move these things really. So let's select some of these edges and just hit G and start moving them. Great. It's already looking a lot better. And now we can come in, select this edge, because these still form sort of a sharp angle that I don't like. Control B, bevel these out, smooth them out. Okay, that looks pretty good. And if we add to our modifier stack here, subdivision surface, let's see. Well, we don't have quite enough information to subdivide this properly. So let's actually delete that for now. And we can drag him down so he's more on the ground. And right now, all I'm doing is just sort of adjusting the ratios of the arms and legs. And things like that, just eyeballing it. So it's looking pretty good. So we can add more detail as we like. We can, in edit mode, we can add a sphere. Now you'll see that because I'm in edit mode and I've added the sphere to this object that already has a modifier on it, if I grab this out, it will have two spheres. Now, if you have clipping turned on when you do this, it will stretch it. So just make sure clipping is turned off if you need to separate these pieces. So now all I'm going to do is delete this bottom half. And I'm just going to fix the shading on this. I'm in edge select mode, so we can come up to face and do shade smooth. So now with this still selected, we can hit RX90 to bring these forward, scale them down, and place them where we need them. Again, these spheres are being reflected off of this central point, so we can make them symmetrical but separate without really any issues. And we need to bring this forward so it's on the surface of our mesh. Cool. All right, and then typically they have like little buttons right here. So to do that, we're just going to duplicate these spheres, but we are placing these on the central point. So we need to remove half of this sphere first. Well, half of this half sphere. So let's Shift-D to duplicate and just move it off to the side so we can work with it a little bit easier. Let's go into wireframe view, zoom in, and box select everything on the left side. Press X and delete the vertices. Grab this, G, bring it to the center. Now we can line it up as close as we can, but we're not going to be able to get this perfect, so we need to turn clipping back on. So we've turned clipping on, but clipping will not affect anything that has already been placed, so we need to just make sure that this line is right on the center. So to do that, just Alt-click to select the loop, press G and X, and if you cannot drag it at all, that means that it is clipped to the center and should not be any problem anymore. Okay, so we have our button. Let's make, a few of them. Looks pretty good. All right. Now to add shapes like eyebrows or a smile or anything like that, what we're actually going to do is we're going to do this in a separate object, and I think that'll be clear in just a moment, and then we're going to merge it afterwards. So giving a little bit of thought to this, so hopefully it works out. Shift A, let's add another UV sphere. Let's rotate it by 90 degrees in the X direction. And again, it's going to be on the surface of this mesh, so we can delete the back half of it. Okay. And I also want to delete the left half of it. Got a couple verts that I missed, no problem. Let's add a mirror modifier now to this object. So add modifier mirror. We're going to turn on clipping. So I was thinking a little bit about how to get sort of a more of a tube shape that still had rounded edges that came and met this main part of the body. So I think the best way that I want to do this, scale it down a little bit, is tab into edit mode on this separate sphere. And with clipping, it must be on for this. Let's grab everything and drag it out in the X. We get a little bit of funky geometry, but let's not worry about that for just right now. We can always clean up our points at a later date. So I want to be able to cut loops through this, and I think, yes, if I do this right now, because of this, the way this sphere was, I will only cut through half. Now, I could cut through half and join them, but I think what I'm going to try to do is dissolve those edges. All I did was box select all these edges that were coming to this central point, and I hit X and I hit dissolve edges. So let's just double check that nothing got messed up by going into solid mode. Okay, that is about right. That's about what I wanted. We can shade it smooth. So I believe now we must connect this point and this point to make this into a loop, because Right now, this is a single face, and as you can see, it has many more than 4 sides. Blender will not recognize a loop if there are not exactly 4 sides. So let's select this point and press J to join them. So now we have this face that has many sides, which we call an n-gon, but we also have this quad. So I believe, yes. Now if I press Control R, I can add a loop all the way through. We can straighten this out. It's forming to this angle. Blender will always try to form your edge loops to match the angles in your geometry, but we can straighten this out to match this one very easily. All we have to do is hit S, X, and 0. All right, so now if we slide this over, so now we've created this sort of straightened, isolated section of loops. So now if we add more loops, they will be straight. Okay, so what I want to do now is give this a curve. So I'm just going to select this center loop by alt-clicking. Let's try this with proportional editing. So turn the proportional editing icon or press O on your keyboard, press G and press Z, and scroll your influence wheel until you get something that is roughly the curve you want. Okay, so now we can scale this a little bit more. We can place it, and let's move it back so it's on the surface of our mesh. Great, so now these pieces are all one piece. When I select it and I tap into edit mode, I can edit these spheres or these half spheres, and as well as this body shape I've created. So we want to join this to this, but if we do this currently, you'll see an error occurs because this piece has a mirror modifier and this piece has a mirror modifier, but they're being mirrored differently. So if we join a piece that is not being modified to a piece with a mirror modifier, it will automatically add the mirror modifier. Well, it's not really adding it, but this piece will then be reflected. But we want this whole piece to be reflected. So all we have to do is just apply this modifier before we add it. Now, even though both of these pieces have a mirror modifier, instead of creating, a mirror modifier stack where there would be 2 here, it thinks that these things are being mirrored the same way, so it kind of merges the mirror modifier. So all we have to do is apply this. So let's come into the modifier stack with this eyebrow object selected, click the drop down and click apply. Again, you can also do this by hovering your cursor over here and just pressing Control and A. So now it's applied. So when we tab into edit mode, this is one single piece. So now if I select this eyebrow, select the rest of the gingerbread man and hit Control J to join it, now you'll see it automatically just adds this piece to this section with the mirror modifier and mirrors it nicely. So we're going to do a similar process for the mouth. We just won't need to apply the mirror modifier beforehand because we're only going to make half of it. So same process in object mode. We're creating a separate object. Shift A, add a sphere. Let's rotate it in the X by 90 degrees. Fix the shading if you like. We're in right orthographic. I'm just box selecting and deleting the back half. And in front orthographic, box selecting and deleting the left half. So now I'm just left with this quarter of a sphere. All right, let's add our mirror modifier. Again, this is the exact same process we went over with the eyebrows. Turn on clipping. You can grab it, we can scale it. And let's fix these edge loops. Just select these funky ones, dissolve them, not delete them. I mean, you can delete them and then fill the hole that it will create, but we'll just dissolve them. couple more steps, select these edges and close them off to form an edge loop, or a face loop I should say here. Add this. We can flatten this out on the X by hitting SX0. Oh, and you'll see I have proportional editing still turned on, so it warped the end here. So just turn that off. SX0. Grab X, slide it over, and now we can add a couple more loops. And we can start, turn proportional editing back on, G, C, and we can try to form roughly the curve that we want. Again, we're not spending a ton of time showing this demonstration. You can, it's a little finicky and you can sort of adjust it however you like. Maybe rotate this so this becomes a little less squished. Something like that. Let's move it up, scale it down to its appropriate scale. GY, put it on the surface. All right, and also you can add the little, they usually have like some little icing details right here, which you can add using the exact same method that we did for these ones, and just moving the edge loops around. But that is going to more or less wrap it up for this demo. Actually, one more thing I want to do. I'm just going to select all the edges that make up this sort of contoured edge. I'm doing this with the shortest path, a combination of Alt and clicking to select loops, and then Control clicking and Shift clicking just to get the selection I want. So you Shift clicked on this twice to make this my active selection. So now if I hit Control, I can just walk the selection all the way down. And now that I have this whole edge corner selected, I can hit Control B and I can bevel it just to smooth it out a little bit. So there you have it. That is the practical use case for the mirror modifier. In the next few videos, we're going to go over a few more of the basic modifiers in Blender before we wrap up the section on modifiers. Well, I will see you in the next video.